What happens when a global superpower strikes deep into the heart of a sovereign nation? In the dead of night, US warplanes unleash precision missiles on Iran's nuclear facilities. But this, ISNT, just another airstrike. It's a spark in a powder keg of global tensions. Within hours, Iran strikes back. Missiles rain down, oil routes are threatened, and the entire world holds its breath. You're about to uncover what the mainstream media won't tell you. This is the full truth behind Iran's retaliation, and what it means for the future of the world. Buckle up, this isn't just breaking news, it's history in the making. The strike that changed everything on the morning of June 22, 2025. The world woke up to breaking news. The United States had launched a coordinated airstrike on 3 of Iran's most heavily guarded nuclear sites, Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. This wasn't just another tactical operation. It was a direct, aggressive move on Iran's nuclear infrastructure, executed with surgical precision. Satellite images confirmed the devastation. Underground centrifuge halls torn apart, uranium enrichment disrupted, and years of nuclear progress halted in mere minutes. But why now? According to US defense officials, the operation was in response to what they called an imminent nuclear breakout. Classified intelligence suggested that Iran had crossed key uranium enrichment thresholds and was potentially days away from weaponization capability. The world had seen rising tensions for months, escalating rhetoric, proxy attacks, and warnings, but no one expected the US to make the first direct move. And Iran, they didn't hesitate. Just hours after the attack, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, delivered a fiery speech, declaring the strikes an act of war and vowing that the Islamic Republic would retaliate with unmatched force. The Revolutionary Guard Corps was placed on full alert. Military communications were scrambled. Missile systems were repositioned across the country. And in a stunning move, Iran's parliament held an emergency session and voted unanimously to authorize the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, critical choke point for 20% of the world's oil across the globe. Oil prices surged, diplomats scrambled, and the question on everyone's mind was clear: had the first domino of a larger war just fallen? Iran strikes back. Iran's response wasn't just political, it was immediate, calculated, and explosive. Within 12 hours of the US strikes, Iran launched a coordinated counterattack. Hundreds of drones and dozens of precision-guided missiles were fired toward Israeli military bases and strategic infrastructure. Explosions rocked cities like Tel Aviv and Haifa, sending civilians scrambling for shelter. Emergency sirens echoed through the night. Power grids flickered. The message from Tehran was loud and clear: if you strike us, we'll strike your allies. But this was just the beginning. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps claimed full responsibility, stating it was a legitimate act of Iranian media broadcast live footage of missile launches, labeling them Operation Sacred Response. What was once a shadow war had now erupted into open confrontation. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, condemned the US at the United Nations, calling the strikes a clear violation of international law and an assault on Iranian sovereignty. He warned that Iran would consider any further attacks from US soil or regional bases as acts of war, and would respond not only militarily, but economically and digitally. Iran's powerful proxy networks across the Middle East, from Hezbollah in Lebanon to Shiite militias in Iraq, were put on high alert. Western intelligence reports warned of possible coordinated strikes on US embassies, air bases, and oil tankers in the region. And back in Iran, state television didn't show fear, it showed preparation. Missile convoys on the move, anti-aircraft systems deployed across major cities, civilians lining up to donate blood. Tehran was mobilizing. But what truly shook global markets wasn't just missiles in the air. It was what Iran threatened next. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz wasn't just symbolic, it was a geopolitical earthquake. Nearly 1/3 of the world's oil supply passes through this narrow waterway, and Iran just voted to shut it down. Oil prices shot past $110 a barrel overnight. Shipping companies rerouted vessels. Naval fleets from the US, UK, and France surged toward the Gulf to ensure freedom of navigation. Suddenly, the whole world was pulled into a regional war with global consequences. The global shockwave the moment Iran launched its counteroffensive, the world didn't just watch, it reacted in panic. Oil markets convulsed. Brent crude prices soared above $115 per barrel, the highest since the COVID recovery. Energy analysts warned that even the threat of a prolonged Hormuz closure could trigger a global supply chain crisis. Sending inflation surging in energy-dependent nations across Europe and Asia, major stock markets dipped. The S&P 500, FTSE, and Nikkei saw sharp one-day drops as investors fled to safe havens like gold and the US dollar. Economists warned that geopolitical instability was threatening the fragile post-pandemic recovery. But this wasn't just about market sit, it was about military escalation and diplomatic fallout. The international reaction, the United Nations Security Council, called for an emergency session. Russia and China blamed the US for provoking the crisis, while the US and its allies argued the airstrikes were a preemptive move to prevent nuclear proliferation. European Union officials expressed deep alarm, warning that if the Strait of Hormuz were fully blockaded, Europe could face fuel shortages within weeks. France and Germany urged maximum restraint and offered to mediate talks between Washington and Tehran offers that Iran flatly rejected. In the Middle East, panic gripped US allies. Saudi Arabia and UAE went on high military alert, fearing they'd be next in Iran's crosshairs. Iraq's government, already balancing ties with both the US and Iran, called for US troops to leave the country to avoid being dragged into a regional war. Meanwhile, Israel doubled down, vowing to assist the US in ensuring Iran never becomes a nuclear threat. Cyber, proxies, and asymmetric warfare. Beyond the visible missiles and threats at sea, another war had already begun, the war in the shadows. Iranian-backed hackers launched waves of cyber attacks on US infrastructure, targeting banks, airports, and government websites. Though most were deflected, DHS raised the national cyber alert to its highest level since the SolarWinds breach. Meanwhile, Iran's proxy militias from Hezbollah to House began issuing their own warnings. Yemen's Houthi rebels claimed they were ready to block Western influence in the Red Sea, while Iraqi militias hinted at disrupting US logistics convoys. It was clear Iran wasn't going to challenge America toe-to-toe on open battlefield terms. Instead, it would bleed it through cyber attacks, economic warfare, and regional destabilization. Washington's dilemma as missiles flew and the Strait of Hormuz hung in limbo. The pressure wasn't just on Tehran, it was on Washington. The Trump administration, midway through his second term, after his inauguration on January 20, 2025, now faced a storm of domestic and global consequences, according to official statements. The strike on Iran's nuclear sites was intended to disable, not provoke. Yet Iran's swift retaliation made it clear that escalation had already occurred. In the White House Situation Room, Trump's team debated the next move: launch additional strikes and risk a regional war, stand down and face criticism for appearing weak, or pivot to diplomacy, but war drums were already loud. President Trump addressed the nation from the Oval Office, stating, "We do not seek war, but we will not hesitate to defend ourselves if provoked further." Still, hardliners on Capitol Hill, mainly Republicans, urged even stronger action targeting Iranian missile infrastructure. Some Democrats, however, warned that the strikes risked dragging the U.S. into another prolonged Middle East conflict. On the ground, the U.S. military geared up. Aircraft carriers moved into the Persian Gulf. Bombers repositioned to regional bases, and thousands of troops were placed on alert. Security levels spiked at U.S. embassies across the Middle East. By the end of June 2025, the Middle East was a powder keg. The U.S. had struck Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Iran had retaliated against Israel. Proxy militias were circling American bases, and the world was anxiously watching the Strait of Hormuz, still technically open, but one wrong move away from closure. Diplomatic channels were flickering to life, again but barely. Switzerland, Turkey, and Oman made bacchanal overtures between Washington and Tehran, but Iran's leadership remained defiant. "There is no negotiation under fire," said Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. "America will pay a long-term price for this aggression." Inside Iran, the narrative had shifted. Even moderate voices rallied around the government. The attack had united conservatives and reformists under one banner: national resistance. The new Cold War begins. Military analysts warned that we may not see a full-blown war, but something more dangerous: a long-term shadow conflict, one that stretches across cyberspace, proxy territories, oil markets, and diplomatic arenas. The US escalates sanctions. Iran accelerates covert nuclear activity. Each side avoids direct war, but neither backs down. It's a pattern history has seen before. Cold War, with hot flashpoints. The global fallout: oil prices remain unstable, hovering around $100, $115 barrel. NATO nations increase naval presence in the Gulf. China and Russia voice support for Iran, calling for the end of Western hegemony. The UN, sidelined and fractured, offers resolutions that go nowhere. Ordinary people, from Americans at gas pumps to Iranians under sanctions, face the real cost. What does this mean for the future? This conflict was never just about bombs and borders. It was about power, pride, nuclear deterrence, and the shifting balance of global influence. The US showed it's willing to act. Iran proved it will respond. And the world now faces a new question. How do you end a war that no one officially declared, but everyone's already fighting? If you found this deep dive valuable, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more truth-based, fact-driven breakdowns of world-changing events. Drop a comment below. Was the US justified in striking, or has it unleashed a storm it can't control? We want to hear your thoughts.